Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Sephiroth, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So today we're heading to Modern to check out a super spicy deck. This is Green-Red Ponza, which recently took Harrison Gill to a top 32 finish at the SCG Modern Open in Syracuse, so congrats to Harrison on their finish with the deck. A quick reminder before we break it all down, if you enjoyed this deck and want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So Green-Red Ponza is really sweet. It is half ramp, half land destruction. So the most important aspect of this deck is turn 1 ramp spells, Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, and Utopia Sprawl. You really need one of these in your opening hand. That's why the deck's playing 10 of them. On the other hand, they're all fairly redundant. I think Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf are probably the best. Utopia Sprawl is harder to kill because it's an enchantment rather than a creature. Arbor Elf has additional upside of untapping a land with Utopia Sprawl, so it essentially taps for 2 mana. Birds of Paradise, kind of the backup, that's why there's only 2 of those. But you want one of these on turn 1, and that unlocks some devastation on turn 2 with a whole bunch of land destruction. So you got Blood Moon, which just locks a lot of decks out of the game, especially when you can play it on turn 2. So you play your Birds, Arbor Elf, your Utopia Sprawl, any of those gives you 3 mana on turn 2. Blood Moon locks your opponent. You're playing a ton of forests, so you can function really easily through a Blood Moon. Your opponent probably can't. When you're not locking your opponent with Blood Moon, you can Stone Rain them to just destroy a land. On turn 2, you're going to keep your opponent at 1 land, or maybe 2 lands, depending on player draw, but you can keep them on very minimal resources, so they're not going to be able to cast anything that's very expensive. And Beast Within kinda is the backup. Not as great on turn 2 as Stone Rain or Blood Moon because you're giving your opponent a beast token, and if you don't have a creature to follow this up with, you could actually die to it. But it still can kill a land on turn 2. And then the deck continues this curve, so you destroy a land on turn 2. On turn 3, you can use an Acid Moss to destroy a land and search your library for a forest, which gets you green or red mana since you have Stomping Grounds, which is a forest that taps for red as well. And then on turn 4, you have access to Primal Command, which does a whole bunch of things. It's main deck Graveyard Hate against Dredge, it's main deck Life Gain against Burn and aggro decks, but the most common mode, I think, would be you put a non-creature permanent on top of the owner's library, so you can put a land on top of your opponent's deck, still puts them down a land, also costs them a draw, and you get to search for a creature, and that's when we kind of get to the second half of the deck. So land destruction is awesome, and it's a great way to disrupt and slow down your opponent, but you also need to back that up with real threats, because sooner or later your opponent's going to draw lands. I mean, Magic decks are a high percentage of lands, so just mana screwing your opponent alone isn't going to win the game. You need to be able to back that up with a threat. So this deck plays a bunch of threats. It has Obstinate Balos and Thragtusk, which are really sweet because they gain you life against aggro. Aggro is one of this deck's worst matchups because like a Burn deck or a Zoo deck that's playing all 1 mana cards, they don't especially care if you keep them at 1 or 2 mana the whole game because they can play all their stuff anyway. Obstinate Balos and Thragtusk help shore up those matchups. They block anything out of those decks, plus they gain you some life to help you stabilize and stay alive. And then you got the big hitters that really close out the game. Stormbreath, hasty damage. With all your ramp, you can actually monster it fairly regularly, and if you're destroying all your opponent's lands, they probably have a bunch of cards in their hand, so it's likely dealing a lot of damage. And Inferno Titan is just a very fast clock. It deals damage when it enters the battlefield, it attacks for a lot, it kills creatures or blockers, and you can pump it up with fire breathing, so it's the most efficient Titan for just closing out the game on its own. So that's kind of the plan of the deck. You ramp up, destroy lands, and then play huge threats to close out the game quickly and take advantage of the fact that your opponent doesn't have many resources to work with. As far as the mana base, get some fetch lands and shock lands. Things are really weighted toward forests thanks to the Acid Moss and also to the Utopia Sprawl, which require forests. So 9 forests in a mountain. In the sideboard, we got some specific answers. Grafdigger's Cage for graveyard decks, dredge decks. Sudden Shock for Infect primarily. Kill something even though your opponent may have a Vines of the Vast Word or Pump spell. Ancient Grudge and Fracturing Gust deal with artifacts. Fracturing Gust also good against Boggles, if that's the deck you're worried about, since it kills all enchantments and gains you life. Then some aggro stuff. Kitchen Finks, also helpful against aggro. Anger of the Gods, great if people are going wide with a bunch of small creatures, and a Dismember. And then for more controlling matchups, you got a Thrun that can't be countered, almost impossible to kill, and a Stormbreath Dragon, dodges Path to Exile, and like I said, deals a ton of damage thanks to Monstrous. So that is Green-Red Ponza for Modern. Deck looks super sweet. Anyway, that's been our Instant Deck Tech for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.